Hey everybody, this is Andrew with the We Are Rising podcast. With us, we have a very special guest. With us, we have Grave Digger. Yes, that is the name, Grave Digger, who will be taking on Retriever. Excuse me, I'm just gonna get the poster up on my thing. Sorry. So Retriever Kazushige. Gravedigger versus Retriever Kazushige at Crossover March 9th this Sunday. And the show will be available internationally. So I bought shows before through Crossover when they and through the same website also does Level G grappling. So we don't have to worry about U.S. credit cards not being accepted and all that stuff. So please buy the show live, and also be available on demand as well. So that's another great thing. But we do have Gravedigger with us. Thank you so much, Gravedigger. I appreciate you talking to us.
Thanks for having me. It's an honor.
So yeah, I gotta ask, who are you? How did you get in Japan? How did you get into MMA?
My real name is Nathaniel Inwood. People call me Nate, but yeah, I kind of started with MMA at a later point in my life than most people. I didn't start any combat sports till I was 27. So I didn't do any combat sports till then, and then kind of just got into it. I'm 35 now, so I'm a little bit on the older side of the curve for fighters. But started it with a buddy who was like, "Hey, you should come check out this gym with me," and so I did. And it happened to be American Top Team in Oklahoma City, and that's kind of where I started. Started getting my feet wet in jujitsu, Muay Thai, kickboxing, and then just kind of expanded. And I'm a military member. I serve in the Air Force, so got stationed in Japan and just kind of continued the journey of MMA in Japan and ended up starting to fight.
Well, listen, I think that age just number in MMA. I had my first fight at 37. So listen, you could do it at any age. You could do it at any age, I feel like. Would you agree with that?
Oh yeah, if you have the will, you have the way. Age is just a number.
So I got asked nickname Gravedigger. How did that name come about?
It's actually a nickname my wife gave me because back in 2019, actually, I got diagnosed with Graves' disease, which is an autoimmune disorder. And it took me for a ride. It wrecked my body. I went from like 180 pounds to 140 pounds in less than a month. And so I had to go through a lot of medical treatment and kind of beat it. And she joking around said, "Hey, you should call yourself Gravedigger because you beat Graves' disease." And so it was kind of a joke at first, and then I started to fight for crossover. And as a joke, I was like, "Hey, coach, let's put my name as Gravedigger," and it kind of just latched on from there. And the Japanese fans and the Japanese population and the crossover organization loved the nickname so much that it becomes my only name that they put on anything, my only name that they call me by. Like when they call, they ask saying, "Hey, how's Gravedigger son?" So it's it just kind of took over, and so I just kind of ran with it after that point. But it all started from my wife just joking around, being like, "You should be called Gravedigger."
So I was going to try to guess how you got your name. I thought it was going to be because you said your real name is Nathaniel. That's a very hard name to translate into Japanese. I'm sure that there's a way to translate it, but like it's probably very difficult. So I was like, maybe you were just given an opportunity to just make a nickname. You just made that name up for yourself, just because for the so something easy the Japanese announcers to announce.
Yeah.
So okay, that's interesting. So, you train at this is accurate. USA Ground Shield Jiu Jitsu and MMA.
Yep, that's where I
What
train right now.
is that? Is that a team on the base itself, or are they off the base?
It's a team that's on the base itself. We train at our fitness center on the base, but we are associated with a couple of gyms off base. So we have the opportunity to go train at some of the gyms in around Japan, which is an awesome experience. Getting to see some Japanese legends and train with them and stuff like that.
So I know you said you trained at ATT in Oklahoma. Now and you train in when you train at Japanese gyms. What is like the big difference to you between the gym you trained at here and when you train at a Japanese dojo?
So when I trained at American Top Team, it was my coach was straight from Brazil. His name was Giuliani Galuppi, and he did the traditional old school Brazilian style of training where like you know we're not late. You did it exactly how it was told. So it really got me started in it and kind of built my fundamentals. But when you go to the Japanese gym, um, it's different because it's a lot more about the technique and speed versus American gym, right? The Japanese fighters aren't known for quite strength, or being physically dominating, but they do have, a tenacity. They do have a speed element that not a lot of American fighters have, and they're very, very technical. Everything's about the small, minor details. So it really helped my technical game grow because I had to start focusing on not just being physically overwhelming, but honing those special and small techniques and the small key aspects of everyone.
Mm. I was just gonna say, in terms of people who to spar with, opponents as well, you're at a weight class that's really not. See, Japanese is either very small or very big, but in between is like the hardest. So is finding people to spar with, finding the right training partners, is that also sometimes a little bit hard if when you go to one of the dojos off base that are mainly Japanese?
Yeah, I'm either sparring with the heavyweights or some lightweight, real fast individual, but I tend to, it gives me different looks when I get to do it. I can try to use my physical dominance when I'm going with heavyweights, whereas with lighter individuals like the lightweights, bantamweights, I try to be more technical and less rely on strength. So it really gives me a different aspects and kind of allows me to hone each part of my game. Fortunately, though, there's a lot of military members that train and fight here in Japan. So a lot of times my training partners and sparring partners are just other military members on base.
Well, I think the let's see, I'm trying to think. Like right now, I think the only other guy that I can think of offhand is Saint. Are you familiar with Saint?
Yep, I know Saint.
Uh,
I've met him, and then you've also you did an interview with Tanner.
yeah,
Uh,
Nolenko, Tanner Nolenko, yes, but he's in Okinawa though, I think, or was in
yep,
Okinawa.
yep, and he came up one time. We've sparred and trained before. It was before his first Rizin fight.
Oh, okay, gotcha. Okay, so I didn't know. So okay, so you train? Do you more often train with people that are from other bases like Tanner and Saint, or do you find yourself more going to just like the gym that's near your base?
Mostly near my base, and there's a lot of the Japanese gyms that were affiliated, like right around the base. So I kind of tend to stick to those. But anytime we get a chance to travel and go train, we kind of take advantage of that. We have a whole bunch of open mats and stuff where we'll have the bases get together and get to train with other people.
Now, is there like a rivalry between like Yokosuka, Yokata, and Okinawa? Do you guys all like have kind of like a rivalry of some kind? Actually, I'm curious to know, have you guys ever done like a military like tournament to see who's like the best at like MMA or something like that, like an on base tournament?
No, unfortunately not. It's actually kind of a friendly relationship. Like everybody knows each other from the different locations, and so they kind of just train and share techniques and help each other grow. The closest it's been to where we've competed is during my amateur time. I fought, or I was scheduled to fight one of the MMA guys from Yokosuka, but he had to pull out of the tournament because of a concussion.
Gotcha. Oh, I'm also forgetting the other guy, Charles. I think he's also in the military as well. Charles, oh, I forget. He fights for Deep. He fights for Deep. He follows me. You
Yep,
know who I'm
I know.
talking.
Yep, Charles Prate. I
Yes,
want to
that's a
say
great. Yes, but I know he Guts. I think he goes by name Guts, I believe, or he goes by like one of those nicknames as well.
yep,
Um,
I've tried him before too. He's a really good striker.
mm, mm. So I want to ask. So crossover. That's a interesting. That's the only promotion you fought for, I think, as a professional. Correct.
Yeah.
So, but have you ever been offered or given consideration to other? Have any has like Deep or any other promotions reached out to you beforehand, or is there some sort of loyalty you have for crossover?
Um, honestly, none of the other organizations have really reached out to me too much because I'm contracted with Crossover
Oh,
for
okay.
fights. And then there's different contracts and stuff, length of the contract after my fights. But I fight so often, and I know Crossover's schedule that's like every 2 months and stuff that they have an event. Honestly, now at this point, they have an event almost every month. And so I constantly am just signing up for them. They gave me my first opportunity as a pro, and we had started when they first became an organization. We kind of started looking at like, hey, let's use this as a stepping stone and branch out from there and start going to other organizations after that. But Crossover has grown so much from when I first fought with them to where they are now, to where they have international fighters coming in from other countries. They're sending their fighters to these other organizations in Korea, Australia. They've had one of their champions fight on one championship, another one of their fighters fight on Road to UFC in Shanghai. So they're growing, and I can see that they're growing and expanding. So it's kind of like, all right, let's kind of see where this goes. They're taking care of me. They've done a lot for me. They're always willing to put me on a card. So kind of just that sense of loyalty to them to see where they take me and then go from there. Because honestly, I started off MMA as just a hobby. I was just like, let's do this. I need something to do. I've always wanted to do it since I was a kid. Um, and my wife really pushed me towards finally doing it. She's like, "You've been talking about doing MMA since we were in high school together. Like, we can afford the time, we can afford it financially. Like, why don't you go out and start doing it?" So I just started doing it as a hobby, and I was like, "I will probably never do this pro." Was my mindset when I started. I was like, "I just do this for fun," and then got to Japan, and things kind of just happened. And next thing I know, I'm 8 fights deep as a pro, and just seeing where this crazy ride takes me.
Crossover is very interesting because they're not just an MMA promotion. For this show, I think they're having kickboxing, and then they have they sometimes do the partnered shows of Level G grappling as well. So they're kind of like they kind of have like a cornucopia of I think you even didn't you do a crossover kickboxing match even yourself?
Yep,
So
I
yeah,
did.
yeah. So it's not just an MMA promotion. It's literally like crossover. There's so much going on at these promotion, and they also have amateur. They also have like an amateur league, I think, as well, something like that, right?
Yeah, they have amateur, S class, and pro. And then they also have Muay Thai fights. They kind of modeled themselves in a way after what a lot of the Asian organizations like One Championship does, where you have Muay Thai on the card, you have kickboxing, you have grappling, you have MMA. So it's definitely a fun event. Like the one on this Sunday has 31 fights on the card for the televised event. So, and in the morning they have an amateur tournament. That's like another 30 fights. So it's an all day event, and it gives you a lot of different things to see and a lot of different prospects to kind of get a look at.
So yeah, let us talk about your fight coming up against Retriever Kazushige. So gotta ask, know anything about him? Do you do research on your fight on your opponents or anything like that, or do you just kind of do your own thing?
I do a little bit of research, so I've seen um one of his fights, his most recent. He's seems to be more of a wrestler based guy. He's won his last 2 fights by heel hook. So I know he has some jujitsu background, at least to be able to pull off some heel hooks. But generally I let my coaches kind of do the full research on them. Like my one training partner, whenever I tell him I got a fight coming up, he goes on the internet and he watches every fight that he can find of my opponent so that he can try to mimic their type of movement, their type of fighting style. So then it gives me those kind of looks when we're sparring and training.
Mm. Oh well, yeah, from my own research, he seems to be a grappler because I think he's finished all of his fights by, or at least his all of his finishes are by submission. Um, he's also lightweight. It looks like he normally fights at a lightweight, so he's going up. Uh, how do you feel about that? That you're facing a guy who will probably be smaller than you? Is that do you think like is that a case of okay, this guy might be just a little bit faster or a bit more, you know, I guess I don't know. Any thoughts on that? Him being a smaller, potentially a smaller opponent?
A little bit of thoughts on, I've thought about that, yeah, he'll probably be a little bit faster, but I will probably have the more physical strength. So that might play a big factor when it comes to the grappling that he's relying on. Um, I'm I tend to stand and bang a lot more than I do grappling in my fights, but by no means am I, a scrub at grappling. I
Mm.
do have some grappling background. And so uh it'll be an interesting fight, but yeah, I've kind of always been the type of person that whoever fights me or whoever steps up, I don't say no to a fight. I think that's also why crossover has always liked me is any opponent they put in front of me, I've been like, yeah, I'm down, no matter what the weight class is, because I've fought a couple of middleweight fights for them, even though welterweight's where I like to stay.
So, in terms of your record, you finished all of your wins are by knockout or KO of some kind. Is that is that something that you when you go into fights like I'm going in for the KO, or is it kind of I want to pick? I know you said you want to stay and bang, but do you also think about picking the right shots while you're fighting?
Honestly, it's kind of just happens. I just go in there and see. I don't really game plan too much when I go into my fights. I have a generalized idea, but I don't like to stick to game plans or have like this, hey, this, I need to do this, I need to work this, because I worry about like if that doesn't work, then you might get stuck up on that. So I kind of just go in there, see how it goes. A lot of times it ends up where I end up in a top position and ground and pound my way to a win. I had a couple of KOs where I've gotten to use Superman punch and stuff like that, but yeah, it's just kind of where my mind goes. I always joke around with my coaches and tell them like, "Hey, I need you guys to yell submissions to me because when I'm in there, my head goes to striking for some reason. I think it's just I love striking, love have fun striking, and so when it gets to that submission part where I'm grappling, my mind doesn't always go to hey, there's an open arm bar, or hey, there's an open heel hook or leg lock. So I just end up keep striking and pull off ones that way.
Do you do grappling tournaments in Japan,
Uh, I've
or
done
have you?
I've done one grappling tournament. I was so focused on my MMA grappling that I never really competed into jujitsu until more recently. My first time competing in grappling was as a purple belt in jujitsu. So, you're competing at a level where a lot of the people here in jujitsu, they are dedicated grapplers. So you go in as a purple belt and you're going against these sports jujitsu that live and breathe it versus my style is more MMA grappling. And so um, it's something that I want to look into after I step away from MMA, because maybe that's the next transition for me is grappling, less head damage, less head trauma. But for right now, it's just kind of a focus on how do I get my MMA skills better? How do I keep growing as an MMA fighter? And then just with how often I fight in MMA, I'm not too willing to take risk in grappling tournaments of getting an injury.
So, how do you want to take your MMA career beyond crossover? Like, do you eventually want to fight for maybe a Pancrase or Shuto Deep or even Ryzen at some point?
I would absolutely love to fight in Rizin or One Championship. Like that would be a dream goal. If the opportunity provides itself, I would 100% jump on it. Um, my last fight was actually against a Pancrase fighter. So we have that kind of connection where I might be able to go fight in Pancrase, but right now it's kind of just seeing where it takes me. If I end up fighting in one championship, that's amazing. If I fight in Rizin, that is awesome too. I've been to a couple of Rizin events and watched them, and getting to be in that type of event would be, something that I never dreamed of. Really, like I said, it started off as a hobby. So if they provide the opportunity, or if it comes up, I 100% would jump on it.
Uh,
Um,
your record's also interesting because and it's you're not the first that's happened to, but your first pro fight you did lose, and but you can't fought the same year and got a win in that fight. So I know some people lose in their first fight and they're like, never doing this again. You know what? Maybe it wasn't for me. Was that when it didn't go your way? Did you have any thought of just giving up, or did you were like, you know what? No, I'm not gonna let this loss get me down. Next one's gonna be different.
yeah, that first loss was kind of rough. I lost. It was actually a doctor stoppage. It says heel hook is what I lost by because my knee, the doctor heard my knee pop and it actually tore my ACL with a heel hook. And so, like, it kind of left me feeling like I didn't really get to show what I was capable of because it happened within the first round, happened so quickly. And so I ended up taking that second fight that same year, even with a torn ACL. And I was like, you know what? I'm gonna see where this goes. See if how I can do. Won the second fight, and I was like, all right, I'm hooked now. I gotta keep going and see how far I can take this now. And but I had to take some time off because I ended up having ACL surgery to repair my ACL. So it took a year off, and then came back to fighting again.
Okay, that was my next question was like, if you if you fought off that ACL and injury and then you went on to have surgery after, because I see that the big gap, nothing happened in 2022 for you. By the way, you fought probably it's the greatest name I've ever seen in MMA. Your opponent was Quick Chop Lee. Might be the greatest name for an MMA fighter, next to yours, of course, of all time. Quick Chop Lee. Um, so what the other thing also is that, yeah, I know unfortunately your last fight was the first time you ever went to like the full rounds. How did that feel going the full rounds with that fight against Sean Watanabe?
Uh, it was uh, it was interesting. Like you said, I've only been into the second round one other time than that fight, so it definitely was a learning experience for me, right? Getting to see I that fight, I took a nasty head kick within like the first, I think 15-20 seconds of the fight that cut my eye open and actually couldn't see out of one of my eyes for a good part of the first round. And so it pushed me to, a place where I hadn't been yet in my career where of like, oh man, I'm not dominating this fight. I'm losing this fight and I need to work my way back. And fortunately, I was able to be like, successful in the clinch and the grappling and push on, but it gave me that moment where every fighter I think has it where they're like, "Man, I'm bleeding, I'm cut bad. Um, I could just give up in the middle of this fight and it wouldn't be any different, nobody would know the difference. I'm kind of beat up and it's okay. But then my mind immediately went to like, nah, we're not quitting. We're in this. We're gonna see this through. And so I think it's a good growth experience for me because before that, I didn't ever have a moment like that in a fight. And I think it's a moment that a lot of fighters get to go through, especially in their amateur fights. Whereas I didn't have an extensive amateur um, fighting time. So a lot of those lessons I didn't learn as an amateur. I had to learn them in my pro.
You had one fight amateur I can see here that was in Oklahoma. Um, what I gotta ask? So, what is like the Oklahoma MMA experience versus the Japanese MMA experience?
Oh, it's completely different. Um, just even with fighting here, my opponent uh in Oklahoma, he beat me. He was more experienced and everything. And after a fight, I went up to kind of like talk to him and be like, "Hey, awesome fight. It was, you did an amazing job. That was great and everything." And he kind of blew me off. And I was like, "Oh, okay." Whereas here in Japan, every time I fought somebody, they come up afterwards, they wanna, like, hug you, they wanna get pictures with you, they wanna start knowing what your Instagram is, and then, like, they're constantly messaging you words of encouragement on Instagram, and it's a whole different experience because it's not so much about, like, putting on face or anything like that or being a tough guy. It's about, hey, let me go out and show you what my art form is, what I practice, what I've done. Let me paint you that picture as an artist, and show you what I'm capable of. And then afterwards, hey, let me talk to you about what the masterpiece that you painted with your artwork and see what I can do to help get better myself and get better and help you continue to get better. So it's amazing to have such supportive people. I mean, I have previous opponents that message me almost daily, just like words of encouragement, maybe something small as like the fire emoji whenever they see one of our posts on crossover or something like that. So it's really different. A very supportive community compared to the experience I had in Oklahoma.
Gotcha, gotcha. We do have two questions, both from my good friend Jay Christian Gary. His first question is, uh, do anybody does anybody ever get turned off hearing you talk about MMA at all, your fights or anything else?
So I'm kind of a humble person. Most people don't realize I fight until like one of my friends mention it. So I don't ever really talk about MMA unless people kind of initiate it with me. Um, but it's most of the time people really enjoy hearing something you're passionate about, and I'm extremely passionate about MMA, jujitsu. It's done so much for my life, especially everybody has hard times in their life, and the thing that I found myself leaning back on was MMA and jujitsu. So when you talk to people about something that you're passionate about, people love to hear something that normally when people are passionate. So haven't really had that experience yet.
Hmm. What is it? I don't know if you ever seen the meme with the guy and the girl in the bed. I don't know if your wife is at this point where she's thinking like, oh, he's thinking about other girls, but instead you're thinking about, oh, who's gonna win between Alex Pahea and Ankalev this weekend or something like that. It's not at that point yet where she's just where it's not at that point. No, I'm sorry, that's the wrong. I'm thinking the other one, the one where he's trying to like where the girls look where she's trying to you're the guy, she's trying to like you're getting distracted by. You know that meme? You know that meme where the guy's going off like this? That's what I'm thinking of. That's what I'm thinking of. Yeah. It's not at that point where she's getting annoyed, like, oh, guy talks about MMA way too much or something like that.
Not at all. It's actually the opposite. Sometimes I'll be like, maybe I'll skip training today, and my wife will be like, "Hey, don't you have a fight coming up?
Mm.
You need to go training tonight." I'm like, I got some time. I've trained 6 days this week. She'll be like, "No, go get your bag, go get your gear. I'll see you in a couple hours after training." So hasn't quite got there yet with her, and I'm hoping to keep it that way, but we'll see.
Does she go watch your fights?
She's seen quite a few of them. My daughter, who's a lot younger, she's about to turn 11, has gone to a couple of them too, and my son. But last June, I dislocated my shoulders really bad when I fought Gunther Kalunda in June last year, and my wife and daughter were there, and it was kind of rough for my daughter to watch, and so she kind of has anxiety about me fighting now, so they tend to stay home now to kind of keep my daughter's mind busy on other things on the days that I fight.
I got you. So the other question that comes from Jay Krish is if you weren't fighting, if that wasn't a part of your life, would you be doing anything else in your life instead of martial arts if that wasn't a part of your life?
Man, it's hard to picture doing anything else right now because I mean, uh, I've dedicated 16 years to the military right now, so that's like the other big chunk of my life besides being a parent. Um, Honestly, I can't imagine doing anything else but martial arts at this point. big into fitness, so maybe it would be something along the lines of just being a coach or training people. But yeah, uh, couldn't imagine doing anything else but martial arts. It's something I just it gives me a feeling of being alive. It's such freedom and like you can have extremely stressful day and just your mind is tasked, you're overwhelmed. And then you get to those mats and like everything seems to fade away for that time that you're on that mat because you have to be so present in the moment and you're just so focused on every technique you're doing, every movement your opponent's making to where you get that like mental break. And so I can't imagine anything else giving me the mental break like that. I've always been an athlete, so I've played a lot of sports, but nothing's provided me the same that martial arts has.
Do you when but right before your fight comes up, when you're in the right before you're supposed to walk out, do you still get nervous, or have you ever been nervous, or how do you have any sort of anxiety or anything that happens right before then?
Yeah, all the time. I'm that guy in the back room that's sitting there, because we have like this queue line, and you get put in the queue line like three fights ahead of yours, so you're just kind of sitting in the hallway waiting to go up. And I'm always in my head like, what is wrong with me? Why the fuck do I do this? Like, what happens if I go out there and get knocked out? And I'm like, something's wrong with me. Like, why do I keep putting myself in this situation and all the nerves are going? And then finally, I make that walk. I get in the ring, and everything just kind of clicks. And I'm like, oh, yeah, this is why I do this every time. This is why I love doing it. This is why I love competing. But yeah, those nerves get at you, man. You're being in your own head, just sitting back there and having to think about the fact that you're about to step in a cage or step in a ring with somebody who has the intent of doing great bodily harm to you. I still get the nerves about it every single time, and I'm like, man, maybe next time it'll be better. Maybe next time I'll finally won't get the nerves, and never seems to not happen.
I'm curious to know, do you speak any Japanese yourself, or are learning Japanese?
Yeah, I speak a good amount of Japanese because I've lived here for 7 years now. So I've put in a lot of effort to learn Japanese. Not nearly as fluent as I would hope to be at this point, but yeah, I've put in a lot of effort to be able to communicate. Like when me and my family go off base, we try to speak in Japanese as much as possible for anything we need at stores, restaurants, and stuff like that.
So I'm also curious to know, and this is I get different answers when I ask different people. You're obviously uh you're black. You don't look like the other Japanese people. Have you ever gotten any sort of like racism or any sort of like I don't know? Have you ever dealt that before off base? Has that ever happened to you, your family?
Honestly, not really. The most that we ever really experienced is like the Japanese are very kind of quiet about it. It's more of a passive thing. So like sometimes on a train, it'll be a busy train and I'll just have a bubble where everybody's squished together and I'll be open, or I'll be sitting on a train and there'll be a seat open beside me and nobody will sit in it. But the way I look at it is, hey, it's just more space for me. Like if that's the worst I gotta deal with is that you're just gonna kind of not sit beside me or give me a bubble of space on the train, I'm okay with that all day.
Okay,
But
gotcha,
I haven't really dealt with it too much.
gotcha. You said you were in Japan for how long again? How many years was that again? 7, you said?
Yep, lived here for 7 so far.
So that means you moved 2018. So you were there during the pandemic.
Yep.
What Japan like during the pandemic?
Oh man, pandemic was rough because everything shut down. We weren't allowed to be on training on base or anything like that. So it was kind of rough. We jokingly call it the dark ages. Uh, because we may or may not have had to be like Jedi Knights, as my coach likes to call it, where we'd go to the gyms off base and their windows would be all covered up. Some of the gyms that we train at are actually in the basements of buildings, so you didn't even have to cover windows. And so, you'd be secretly going down there and getting in training rounds. But it was definitely a different time period. Um, in some ways, it was kind of nice because right now Japan's experiencing an over tourism, and so like we could go to all the temples and we could go to all these different places that are normally full with tourists and people on, and it'd be like a ghost town. So it was almost like your own personal touring of some of these temples and
Mm.
stuff.
So I went to Japan 2 times before the pandemic. I felt like, just the regular mountain tourists that were there. Then I went there the week after all restrictions were lifted. And it was empty. I should say it was empty, but it was emptier. And then I just went last year, and I don't know how Japan could sustain that many tourists. I could not. There were times where I couldn't even. Shibuya crosswalk was just like, well, it was a mess. It was a mess. That's all I can say.
Yeah, one.
Um. So okay. Do you? So I'm surprised that Ryzen didn't reach out to you during the pandemic, because they put Saint on the card, they put Tanner on the card. I'm surprised they didn't reach out to you, because they were that was the best time to be a military based MMA fighter.
Yeah, I think it's just through the different chains because like the different gyms that you're associated and stuff with, and so the connections that my coach and his coach have were more towards crossover deep and pancrase versus connections with Ryzen. So I know Saints coach has connections and knows people within Ryzen. So that may have played a factor in it, but
Hmm, gotcha. Do you ever see yourself coming back to the United States, or do you want to kind of make your career, I guess, your MMA career in Asia?
um I kind of just have enjoyed fighting in Asia and kind of wouldn't mind just keeping it in Asia. If some opportunity really popped up, I would be on that was worthwhile. I'd jump on it, but for the most part, I just want to stay in the Asian organizations just because of the different emphasis. I feel like, I'm a very quiet person. I don't like to do a lot of shit talking. Don't like to do a lot of that. So I don't feel like I would sell myself as well in the US versus in Asia where I can just show up, fight my ass off, and that be enough to kind of sell my.
Well, then I would have to ask in addition. Well, are you familiar with breaking down?
No. Oh yeah, actually it's the YouTube video with the different some of them are MMA fighters and some of them are street guys, right?
Yakuza or criminals, whatever. Because I was gonna say, if you were familiar with that, like, what do you think about that as somebody who's like, kind of, quiet, reserved, and then you have this MMA show, this combat sports show with all these guys throwing chairs at each other, throwing water at each other, cursing at each other in Japanese. I mean, I don't know. Do you think Japan may be going that route? Because Breaking Down is very popular. It is. They get millions of views on every video.
I think it's more of two separate halves. Like it's almost like two different shows. It's almost like WWE and regular wrestling is kind of how I look at it. Like you want the WWE for people to watch and kind of see, but also people really want to see actual technical wrestling and that aspect of it is kind of how I look at it. I don't see in the organizations it going that way. Like Japanese fighters will sometimes say something like, "I'm gonna knock this guy out this fight," and that's about as far as shit talking goes. Um, so I don't see it that way. I think it just kind of shows like that to me feed kind of the MMA stereotype that a lot of people have about fighters and stuff like that, about how we're just hot-headed individuals ready to throw hands or just going to go off the hinge at any moment. And I think it's just kind of a show that feeds that stereotype that a lot of people want to see, of course, the extremes of it. But I don't see MMA in Japan going that way at the moment.
Gotcha, gotcha. I should have asked it before, but I'll ask it now. How do you feel about being the main event?
Ah, It's kind of it's an honor, it's an experience. It's my third time being a main event for crossover. Um, but it is kind of like I'm not a superstitious person, but my track record as a main event hasn't been the greatest. Because like I said last year, when I fought Gunther Kalunda, I was the main event, and that's when I dislocated my shoulder in the first round. And then the one kickboxing fight I did, crossover had me as the main event on the on the kickboxing card, and I got TKO'd on that one. So not the greatest track record, but I'm hoping this fight can turn it around. Been putting a lot of effort in since last year, having those two losses at the end of the year, and kind of was like, all right, I need to go back to the drawing board, make some changes, see what we can do better. Like before then, I had been just doing all my strength and conditioning coaching myself, due to me having kind of a background in that. And this time I was like, you know what? I'm going to go out. I'm going to get a strength and conditioning coach. So I got up with Ford Training System, who's done by individual named Bryce Ford. And he has programmed these workouts. And I mean, these workouts, I think they're as mentally tiring as they are physically tiring. But they have put me in the best conditioning. My cardio is the best conditioning it's ever been. So I was like, I'm going to go into this main event, making sure that I'm as prepared as possible and see if we can get a turnaround. Because I don't like being superstitious and having this whole mindset of, man, I've not been doing too well on these main events.
The other thing I know is these are 2 rounds. Have you fought in 3 round matches before yet, or not yet?
Only as an amateur. For whatever reason, crossover likes to keep it the 2 5-minute rounds. And
Uh,
so
I'm thinking you said there's 37 fights. Maybe that's the reason why. Because if 3 fights and 37 fights, they all go to decision, you guys will be there for the entire day, along with
yeah,
the amateur thing that they have before that as well. That's what I was
yeah,
thinking.
yeah, that's what I'm thinking too. Because their amateur fights are 2 3-minute rounds, and then like the kickboxing are 3 3-minute rounds. So they don't really go to any sort of third round when it comes to MMA unless it's for like a title fight and it's a draw. There's a
Gotcha.
lot of fighters that have a lot of draws on their record in Japan, and it's due to that whole 2 5-minute round
Mm-hmm.
setting.
Mm-hmm. So one of the last questions I have for you is: so if somebody wants to get into MMA, they want to try to get ready for their first fight. What do you recommend? Like, what advice would you give to somebody who wants to pursue this?
And I would say just take that first step, right? Like I said, I started at 27 years old, never have wrestled, never had done jujitsu, never any sort of combat sports. And I just dove in and went to the gym and started training all of the martial arts that I could at the same time. So kickboxing, Muay Thai, jujitsu, and just be open and humble. I think a lot of people come into the gym thinking like, "Hey, I know how to fight," or "Hey, I could probably handle myself," and then they get humbled by some of the people that have trained for a while or even trained for a little bit. And sometimes people are like, "Okay, I need to keep coming back so I can keep growing, get better because this showed me I'm not where I'm at." And then other people can't take that and they kind of get discouraged and are like walk away because their pride's been hurt by that. So, best thing I could say is just take that first step and be prepared to be just open and receptive of whatever comes your way and know that you're probably going to suck at the beginning. Like it's going to be tough, it's going to be hard. You're going to be the nail instead of the hammer in most of your rounds and most of your training sessions. But at some point it's going to switch and you're going to have days where you're the hammer and days where you're the nail, and it gets better and you just continue to grow. And it's
So I Oh, sorry, go ahead. Sorry, go ahead.
And I would just say that the community in martial arts, when you find the right one, man, is some of the best community I've ever been in. It's almost like an extension of my family, right? Like we have Christmas dinners together, we do all sorts of stuff. outside of the gym together. So it's like an extension of your family. Probably one of the most supportive communities I've ever been in.
So I was going to also say that, and this is a theory I have. Even if you're at an older age, getting to it at an older age is still not a bad thing. And I have a theory that all these young guys who started way before us, because I started jujitsu at 20, right after I graduated college, all these guys who started doing like wrestling at the age of 6 or 7 and whatever, they become they become withered and can't do the sport when they hit their 30s. Since we start older, we're we're not as beaten up as they are. So it's almost kind of an advantage that's it works out for us. It works out that way. I don't know. That's a theory I have. That's just I have nothing to back that up with, no science, but that's you're I'm using you as evidence. I'm using myself as evidence.
I'd agree with it. I mean, our bodies aren't kind of beat up and battle tested like theirs are at that point. I will just say that they have the definite experience advantage that I wish I had. I definitely wish I had done wrestling or something at a younger age,
Oh, when they
just
hit
so
their
that.
prime, like in their 20s, oh, they're great, early 30s, whatever. But I mean, you look at Henry Cejudo, Dominic Cruz, Uriah Faber, all these guys who started when they were young at whatever aspect of martial arts, and then they hit like past 35. The exception is for heavyweights, but like lighter weight guys that like yeah, you definitely start to see them breaking down and not they lose that snap. They lose that extra that pep in their step, as they used to as the saying goes.
Oh yeah, I would agree. My coach has a theory. He says that he believes that fighters have about 10 years. That's about how long their body will stay up. So yeah, if you start, when you're super young, then that starts your 10-year clock. Basically, is how he looks at it. Versus if you start a little bit older, you got a little bit longer on that 10-year clock.
Before you go, Gravedigger, I just want to give you an opportunity to plug your sponsors, plug your gym coaches, anybody else you want to give a shout out to.
Yeah, I want to thank, of course, my family. They're always supportive. Like I said, my wife's always pushing me. My kids, they motivate me, get me to do everything. Um, I want T-Soma, or the Style of MMA. I'm wearing one of their hoodies right now. They've been with me since the beginning. They are amazing apparel brand. Like if you need any sweatshirts, gis, rash guards, even striking gear, they are the team to go to. I love them. Definitely one of the best sponsors I've ever had. And then my other sponsor is New Luck Inc., one of the tattoo parlors here in Japan. So if you're ever in Fusa and need a tattoo done, go to Taku at New Luck Inc. He will connect you, take care of you, does amazing artwork. But
I'm
yeah,
at, I'm actually surprised to hear that because usually tattoos in Japan is usually like water and oil. They don't go together. Actually, I'm gonna ask that right now. Have you ever been kicked out of an onsen or not allowed in some place because of your tattoos? Has that ever
yeah,
happened
there's
before?
a couple of nonsense that I've not been allowed into. A couple of beaches and water parks where they're like, no tattoos, and it doesn't help that I have tattoos on my neck and stuff, so there's not
Oh,
any way to kind of cover up. So yeah, it makes it a little bit harder to get into some of those places.
okay. I also I don't know if you have any social media that you want to plug. If you want to, that's up to you though.
Yeah, if people want to come out and support, it's a simple way to remember my Instagram's Gravedigger MMA, so it's not too hard to find it normally. But always love people come out. I try to interact with anybody that wants to talk to me. To me, I'm still just this, nobody from Pittsburgh that just likes to train and fight. So like when people come up and ask me for autographs, come up and ask me for pictures or send me messages of support on Instagram, it always makes my day because that it's just surprising to me still. It's still kind of a weird aspect for me.
So you're originally from Pittsburgh?
Hmm.
Oh, okay. This might be testing your old school movie knowledge, but are you familiar with Dawn of the Dead?
Yeah,
You know the Monroeville Mall?
yeah.
Do you know that Walmart just bought it out,
No, I didn't.
and they're gonna demolish it sometime later this year.
Oh man, I remember going there a lot as a kid. I haven't been to Pittsburgh in a long time. I actually haven't been back to the US too many times since I've been in Japan, just because my work and my job require me to be here. But yeah, man, that's crazy. I did not
Mhm.
know that.
Yep. So, but if you ever come back, the Monroeville Mall may be a Walmart.
Well, I'll have to check that out or keep that in mind
Yeah.
when I do come back that way.
Last thing I have for you, Gravedigger, and I know you say don't trash talk, but if you have anything you like to say to your opponent, Retriever Kazushige, positive or negative, the floor is yours.
Just looking forward to see what he brings to the table. Looking forward to fight. Let's go out and put on a show and gambate, gambate.
And you can see Gravedigger take on Retriever Kazushige crossover cage 5, March 9th. This Sunday, that'll be Saturday night for most of us in the United States. You can watch the show available on Twitcast. I'm going to put the link in the description thing here so you can click it and all that. There's two ways that they can buy it. They can just buy the show or they can buy it and support a fighter. I just found out. So if you do want to support Gravedigger, make sure you do that option, and you have the ability to watch it until the March 23rd, which is great because Pancreas does not give us that option. Pancreas only gives us the option to watch the day of, or the day that's live, which is absolutely insane. So if you can't watch it live, watch it on demand. But Gravedigger, thank you so much. I've already ordered the show. I'm looking forward to it. I won't be watching 37 fights live, but I'll be watching the next day. So I'm going to try to watch it unspoiled. So I'm looking forward to your fight, and yeah, hopefully you get a win in this one, man. And maybe one day we'll be talking to you when you're fighting for the welterweight championship of crossover.
I would love for that, and I hope that is in the future. And I thank you again for giving me this opportunity to come out here and talk to you.
No problem. No problem.